Thanks everyone for joining. My name's Jasmine. This is the TBM Council TBM Tuesday. So this is our regular webinar series that we have usually 2 or 3 Tuesdays of the month. So if it's a Tuesday, you can think TBM and there's probably going to be something going on for you. This session today, we have Powell Latimer and Dixon actually, I should have asked you how you pronounce your last name, but Casamal. Let me know if that's the wrong way. And they'll be talking. Casamali. Okay, thank you. And they'll be talking about virtuous data cycles. So I'll go ahead and pass it over to Powell to get us started.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jasmine. I appreciate it. Welcome everyone today. We're really excited. Dix and I are very excited to be speaking with you. We're going to talk a little bit about the, like Jasmine said, most recent white paper we put out from the TBM Council, which I did most of the work on and in collaboration with Dixon and a few others in our community. It's called Initiating a Virtuous Data Cycle with TBM. Now, I'm going to go ahead and jump in here. And I think the first thing we need to do is define what we mean by virtuous data cycle. And we're going to get to that in just a second. But first, also, just let me say, Dixon, really happy that you're here joining us. Jasmine just dropped a link to the white paper in the chat, so if you haven't reviewed it, you're welcome to do that there. Dixon was one of the initial conversations we had for this white paper, and we're really happy to get him on here talking. So, Dixon, thank you again for joining us, and we're excited to have some of your perspective here as well.
No, excited to be here. Always happy to join in and help the TBM Council, especially all of you adopters out there that are looking for insights, information. I'm often one of them, so happy to be here. Yeah,
well, cool. Well, let's go ahead and jump in. And what I'll ask of y'all here is if you have questions, as Dix and I are kind of doing a little discussion here, please feel free to drop them into the chat, and I'll get them answered as we go. I'll also open it up at the end if anyone wants to come off mute and ask a question. But if you don't mind dropping any questions you have in the chat, we'll make sure to get those answered and bring those up as kind of organically our conversation moves here. Additionally, please forgive me if I cough a little bit. I have a toddler, and so I get sick every like 2 weeks. So I'll be popping some lozenges and trying to not cough too much. Okay, let's start here. First off, what is this whole thing that's a virtuous data cycle? And I know that in different contexts, the idea of a virtuous data cycle means a lot of things, right? This could be data people have a definition of this. Your finance folks might have a definition of this. In the TBM context, I am using this term, or we are using this term, to talk about a specific phenomenon that we see every time that we at the council talk to people that are really successful in their TBM practice. There's some common themes that always come out. And one of those themes is this idea of a virtuous data cycle. And what that means is there's an initial nugget of insight that generates additional buy-in and additional access and additional visibility and impact for the TBM practice. That generates additional insight. That generates deeper insight, more precise, accurate insight. That generates more impact and TBM practice. And we kind of cycle upwards in that ever increasing value and impact creation for the TBM council, or the TBM practice that you have. This is of the 30 to 40 conversations we've had since conference last year with various leaders in the community. It's like 80 to 90% of people describe a very similar phenomenon to this, that we got something and that helped us get some momentum, and that built until we have the ear of everyone we need to have, the buy-in of everyone we need to have, and it's all happy in the valley. Until something happens where it's not happy in the valley. But that's our virtuous data cycle. And kind of this phenomenon that we see that we want to make sure that everyone can replicate. But the other thing that we continue to see as part of that is that there's like between half and a third. And sorry, John, I'm not showing anything on the screen. So we're going to keep this more of a discussion here today. The white paper that we have does detail a lot of stats here. I'm happy to bring that up as well. But anyway, there's about 1/3 of people that don't get there. Between 1/3 and 40% of people that highlight that they're not in the community, that highlight they're like not really getting that cycle. So there are kind of 2 data points we have there. that we know anecdotally this thing exists. We also know from other surveys we've done that access and trust in data is a really big differentiator for the impact of TBM practices. So that's in our State of TBM survey the past year. And also we know that a lot of folks flag resistance as the primary things that keep them from getting what data they need. So so I guess one of the questions that we wanted to start with today is what are the barriers that keep this cohort of folks typically from getting into this really fun upward cycle of more impact, more access, more insight, more impact, more access, more insight? What causes, what are the roadblocks there? And I want to throw that to Dixon first here. And Dixon, I'm curious, I know we talked about this a few months ago, and I'm curious from your perspective, A, is there anything you want to add with my definition of virtuous data cycle? And B, what are the things that you in your work at the Standard and at other places have seen as the kind of primary blockers for starting this kind of this upward cycle?
I think on the first one, you hit it on the nail in terms of definition. On the second, I would definitely start with the people aspect of TBM. Yes, it's a decision management, value management framework. It's extensive. There's lots of tools and various levels from which you can start your adoption journey. But you got to start with people. A lot of the elements that we need with TBM work, specifically around data, are owned by someone. By someone who either owns that data within the organization. My TBM journeys have always started there. So it's the softer side of engagement. And I've typically with a full-blown stakeholder assessment. So if you're lucky enough to do a TBM assessment with any of the vendors out there, you know this is a key element of engagement. They do interview folks. But if you're a TBM leader or you've been tasked with executing TBM at your organization and you're looking for a place to start, people is number one. Your stakeholders, who are they? What do they generally do in the organization? Surveying the typical things. Who are typically the loudest voices? Who knows the most, right? And typically when you have an individual who's the loudest voice, they get their information from somewhere. It's always an engineer who has deep insights, who they have a really great relationship with. You need to find those people, make friends with them, and help them understand the value of what you're trying to do and the type of data you need to get started. Again, I make no assumptions about levels of maturity. So I always start at the basic level. Here are the things that for TBM, for us to be successful, we need at the foundation layer, at the towers, and then services. But if you're starting at the very bottom, start there. And you may start with your financial folks, your systems folks who understand the GL structure, chart of accounts, and those the procure to pay process and all of those pieces. On the IT data side, my first place I stopped, besides stakeholders who approved the initiative, was to really partner with data architects and enterprise architects. Those two were critical to some of the things we've been able to do at the Standard. If you think about it, the enterprise architects know where all the bodies are buried, right? They know where all the apps are. However, everything together, what kind of is generated by those systems, what kind of reporting is available. And even if they don't have an APM tool that tells them all that information, the tribal knowledge that they carry with them from years of being at the organization, very valuable. So becoming friends with them and really partnering with them to to walk through what you're trying to achieve with your TBM journey is important. The data architects, for several reasons, but primarily for an understanding of what kind of data is available, whether it's business data, performance data on IT, on business applications, usage volume, that type of thing, or even just namings of applications or systems. You will find that in your people engagement, you're going to discover things around how many data sets there are in the organization. Engineer X says we have 3 sources of information. Architect Y says we have 5. They may all say the different things, but really getting those people in the room to really talk through what you're trying to achieve, but really leveraging your soft skills to appeal to experts that have very deep knowledge about the organization and all the artifacts you need, but leveraging the softer skills to really connect with them, help them understand what you're trying to do. But from a standard standpoint, enterprise architecture, data engineering, were the top 2, and I'd say the third was the structure, the infrastructure team, because they have all of the compute, the storage, all of those elements that you'll need further along in the journey. And with TBM work, the infrastructure, a lot of the things you discover about underutilization, you will discover there. And in the interest of partnership, persuading them that transparency is part of the way we want to manage performance going forward, and cost transparency going forward is critical, because I think that group of folks tends to be a little bit more guarded than the rest of the organization around how I manage my business, how I'm going to leverage underutilized assets. That kind of information, they're very guarded about it. So really partnering with them to explain that they're a key enabler for us to be able to achieve cost transparency is important. The other strategy, I'd also say, you may have personalities that are complete opposite sides of the partnership that you desire. The enterprise architects, data engineers tend to be pro TBM, because it's an opportunity for them to really share the value of their work. On the infrastructure side, you may want to get them together with data engineering as well as enterprise architecture. But the common question I always ask them is, what do you need to run your business? What kind of information, what kind of metrics? It's the same information that enterprise architecture needs of infrastructure. Same information that data engineering requires of both sides. So they have things in common, but helping them understand that by bringing them together is I would say, mission critical, number 1, on people's side.
Really, because I think the primary, we did as part of the research for this piece, we did a little pulse survey of our community, and far and away the biggest result that survey flagged was that biggest impact is just resistance to transparency across the organization. That nobody wants to give away the keys to your kingdom. And that's a really challenging thing to manage from a soft skill standpoint. You can say all of the things you want about how great this transparency will be and how wonderful our world will be post TBM, but that change is scary, and especially handing over my data is scary. I think the and the soft side of that is really important. I think there are the logical follow-up from that is like, okay, like, how do I people be on like that? And I want to highlight 2 things, that 2 kind of tactics that really came to the fore when we talked to some other practitioners that had done this, that I think are really interesting. The first is we had a practitioner that I spoke with that said, okay, I'm going to take the person that's the most gung-ho about TBM transparency, I'm going to put them in a room with a series of meetings with the person who is the most against TBM and thinks this is a stupid idea and we should never do it and is the most resistant. And out of that, a very dialectic and dialectical approach of like, we got our synthesis and antithesis, and they reached common ground. And the way that worked was, not only did that person have we kind of had an advantage in numbers in the room, right, where you had your practitioner and your ally in there with your main opponent. But the opponent made the argument stronger and challenged appropriately and was able to be helpful. And over time, you actually got the opponent on board. That person said, yeah, now I have two allies instead of one. Which was I thought that was a really cool idea and a good way to your point, Dixon, to say like, okay, we've got all these different perspectives. Let's put them in a room, and a lot of times these people aren't going to be in a room that often. Their perspectives are not going to be together that often. And maybe that's really scary to some people, right? To put the people that are the most mad at you in a room. But I think that's a necessary step. And I think the other thing that universally practitioners that have successfully done this have reported back to us is, now hang on with me, is being wrong in a public forum.
Absolutely. Being
comfortable being wrong in a public forum. And what that means is, I know the data stinks. I know the data is missing an important part because service line director A won't give me what I need, and I can't get up to them, can't get visibility, whatever. But I know that I'm going to go present some financial results or some findings in the board meeting or the stakeholder meeting, whatever that is for your particular for your level, and I'm going to present this that I know is directionally relevant and correct, but I know is also missing some important pieces. And again, we hear the same story of people saying, I got in a room with our CIO or our VP or whatever the level was that was causing an issue. And I said, hey, like, this is the number that we're looking at. And they said, well, hey, no, that's wrong. That's not what we need to see. And I said, you're absolutely right. That is a gap. Can you help us fill that gap? And now you've got them in a pub, and this is a little bit of this is light public shaming, but this is saying like, hey, like you're right. I need that information. Can you help me get it? And in that public forum, because you've been brave enough to show some data is incomplete, you're able to get It's not about showing the data; it's about getting buy-in from your other stakeholders across the organization. And that is, in my notes, I have like 7 different examples of people that all said like, yeah, I did this, got in a room. It was awkward for 5 minutes and it was fine. And that was the breakthrough we needed. Like that seems to be a consistent light bulb moment on the people side of things.
Yeah. I think strong commitment to partner, it needs to be at the center. I'm often reminded by one of my employees how often I said I stand corrected in these conversations. Because I will be wrong a lot, and what I need is a partner that can help me fill in the blanks. We know it's not going to be perfect, and sometimes providing the context from which data will be shared is important, because people immediately go to the fearful, I'm going to be outed for how poor this data is or how poorly I'm managing this area of the organization. No, the critical thing is the context around improvement, right? In a lean way, we want to improve. We will discover things along the way. We will find underutilized assets. The immediate action is not, what are you doing about that? Let's lay out a strategy for improving the quality of the data so you can have confidence in the decision that you need to make with the information you have. If it's incomplete, how can we improve it? Is typically been my approach, and it's worked very well. Even with the hardest of heads.
I do think that's a really important thing for all of our finance friends in the world, and even a lot of our technologist friends too. Is just, hey man, like you're never going to get to perfect. There are a number of folks that there are horror stories you hear about with any implementation. Like we have to get it perfect. 5 years later, we're still not perfect. Perfect does not need to be the enemy of good enough to make impact. And that's another common theme that we see from folks that are being successful. It's like, yeah, I knew it was not, the data is not great, but it was good enough to do what I needed to do, and we can make it better. We can basically improve the plane while we fly it from a data perspective. And I know that's the more organic approach that a lot of folks end up taking. But I do want to take a little bit of time here and pivot our conversation, Dixon, to, there's another piece of this that's not just convincing stakeholders to do what you want, but that is actually transforming and making sure that our data architecture is what we need it to be and can be nimble and modular, and the transparent data framework that we need. And that goes beyond just having a common data model, right? Like this, beyond just having like kind of those high level things defined. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about that, about the role of architecture and how that can really magnify the impact of what you can do with the data cycle.
Absolutely. I think if you think about the landscape today, you have TBM, you have FinOps, you have the common service data model with ServiceNow. There will be more, right? It won't end, but rationalizing it and start rationalizing it over time and integrate it is going to be important. So I think the way TBM solutions out there integrate that data and normalize it for TBM purposes is extremely useful. However, if you're starting from scratch and you're trying to think about longer term data architecture, just start cataloging things, right? Just start cataloging things. I think of things. I'm one of those people that sometimes dreams in cubes or databases. So I think of lists of applications. I think of lists of projects. I think of cost centers and who our businesses are, organizing that into a logical hierarchy, and building that data set over time, adding elements over time. You can start in Access, you can start in Excel, or even SQL Server if you're that nimble with databases. But you have it in the same place. It's going to make it a lot easier for you to mature the architecture. At the Standard, we started by talking to all the stakeholders that I mentioned earlier and actually building an integrated data architecture over time to help us with all the TBM data sets, from the financial pieces all the way to the much more mature stages. When you're starting in the financial layer, the most important thing from a TBM perspective likely is going to be storytelling. I want you to tell me what the numbers say. And what the most important thing for you might be at the early stage is to be able to segment the GL, be able to tell stories about what's driving, what's run, what's grow, what's transform. And you might leverage your P2P system to tag purchase orders. This is a transformation item. This is, that kind of work and creating that kind of intelligence for yourself just at the financial layer will allow you to do budgets that are meaningful to stakeholders, will allow you to align your budgets to strategies that the business is pursuing by tagging those projects to strategies, to revenue, to drivers. And that's just at the GL layer. So starting there, I think it's fundamental, it's foundational. If you're looking to evolve the financial piece from a financial strategy perspective into capability, you're going to need the APM data, the list of applications, and mature from there. But I do think if you're starting fresh with TBM, storytelling and improving your financial strategy, your financial planning process is very high value, quick win for the business, your stakeholder, your CFO, your head of finance, because you can tell stories with numbers in very different ways. Your waterfalls are going to be driven by that kind of segmentation of run, grow, transform, or initiatives and strategies, or drivers of revenue, or operational efficiency. So just at the GL level, you can get started, but beginning to incorporate the TBM taxonomy into your data architecture and integrating it into a common database over time is, I think, where you will gain efficiencies as you move up the TBM framework. that's how I would characterize the data side, Pell. I think the tools you can leverage later on to bring it all together. If you're a Databricks environment, you're a Snow environment, putting all of that information in one place, wherever the business data is, you should have that information also there. So you can join it, you can look up relationships, you can integrate it, and you can create profiles for specific use cases associated with value management, enterprise architecture, for example, for them to build more cost-effective applications. Strategy management in terms of the projects, how the metadata, how you tag projects with business initiatives, with revenue drivers, all of those pieces. There's a strategy component there. And then, of course, performance management around all of the things that your ServiceNow platform can give you around how efficient and effective you are at releasing and changing the environment, pulling that information in so you can draw all of that into a TBM deployment over time is what I would characterize as more integrated data architecture, bringing it all together.
I do like that also, that it's that what you're describing. Again, we're going beyond. We're in a little bit of the nerd zone now, which is where I wanted to be. This is going beyond just kind of like just having your TBM model. This is kind of talking about how we're going to integrate. We're going to integrate all these data sources together at a tactical level. But also, I like that what you're talking about could be approached either direction, right? You could either say, cool, we're going to like build something out and use the TBM taxonomy to make that common database more accessible to integrate out from, or we could go apply the TBM taxonomy to all of our disparate data sources to make them easier to get into the common database as well. Like that's the benefit of the common language. You can really do it either way, but that also helps make all of those connections at a very tactical level, all of those integrations, all those APIs, all those little hinges that occasionally break and make your life a headache for the next 6 to 50 hours, or however long it takes to fix those things, where you have to get the data engineer to find out what's wrong with the SQL query or the API connection, makes all those things more robust and less brittle and more transferable, which in turn makes your points of failure less susceptible to failing, which could be a real big win for someone who, even if you're managing, dozens and dozens and dozens of connections, you still have this opportunity. So I love that's great. I do want to be mindful of time here. We're at time. Did anyone here have questions that they wanted to ask, or anything you wanted to ask of Dixon or myself here about this or anything else? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Oh, here we go. We have a question in the chat here. What components are must-haves to kickstart the Virtuous data cycle? Ooh, that's a good question from Young Tang. What do you think, Dixon? You want to take a minute on that, or do you want me to give a quick?
Go for it. I'll go for it. I'll
Okay.
compliment.
Yeah, I would say the two. If you only had two things, I think if you had enough data to get directional insight, again, like you don't even need. This doesn't need to be. I talked with one practitioner. I said, "Yeah, I don't know if it's a $10 million savings or a $2 million savings, but I know that anywhere in that range is reasonable and significant that we should go get. And if it ends up being 2 or 10, that's fine. But it's still like this is something we should chase. So I know that there is money to be. I know there are savings or cost efficiencies to be found. So good enough data. Probably even just if you just have access to your GL, it's probably enough to get started. And the other thing I would point out is you need some kind of executive sponsor, because if you're going to have to deal with people, and in order for the tactic that everyone cited as valuable to be used, I've got to go to a board meeting and get this be wrong publicly. You need someone in the room that's on your side. You can't, or at least that is bought into the idea of what you're trying to accomplish there. You can't do it if you're just talking to a hostile crowd of C-suite level executives, that's going to be a bad day for you. But you need at least one person that is willing to help you move forward in that. Say, actually, Bob, like, can you help us get that information as a peer? I think those would be the two things that would be must-haves, non-negotiables. Everything other than that, you can kind of build as you go, I would say. But Dixon, tell me if you disagree with that.
I think besides the partnerships with my favorite people, the enterprise architecture and data, I think the one place adage. You can try lots of different Excel spreadsheets, lots of different SQL Server databases, but decide on one place for you to have that data, so that your cycle always comes back to the same data source. It's a lot more challenging when data owners give you access to their database, because then you need to integrate that somehow, somewhere. But having one place where all of that data can live is important. Whether it's an Azure database or a SQL Server database, these things are not very expensive these days, right?
Yeah.
You can get a lot of horsepower out of a SQL Server database or even an Azure warehouse to get started and to load data. But I would say the relationship and one common place from which to build your database is important.
Love that. That's a good point too. So many folks describe having Azure and Google Cloud Platform and environment spread across their organization. Cool, great. Any other thank you, Young Ting. That was very kind of you. I think we're 4 or 5 minutes over time. I think what I will say, Jazz, unless you want to open up for additional questions, what I will say is, feel free to reach out to Dixon or myself. I'm employed by the council, so I'm here to help you all that are on the call. So feel free to reach out with any questions or follow-ups, and look for more stuff from Dixon and myself here, because we're both want to get more into the data architecture side, provide more support and insight there. So thank you all for your time, and we appreciate your attention today. And thank you, Dixon.
No, thank you, Pal.